Now be recorded.
Hello. Yeah. Let me quickly share my screen. Okay. So for today, so on Friday we have seen how to how to record hours. So on Friday we have seen that how to get a plain working time without breaks, as well as we were able to record create valuation for recorded working time with without breaks, and then calculating the overtimes. So how the overtime is being calculated, that we were able to achieve it through different valuations. And those valuations were, we have created three valuations. So first evaluation is regarding the planned working time, which gave us the without break planned working time, which is this part. Then later on, we were able to create a recorded working time valuation, which was this without breaks. And the last one was how to calculate the overtime. So basically, valuation two minus valuation one gives us the overtime. Now today we're going to see about, so let's say today we're going to talk about the sessions and the requirements. Like, let's say we'll talk about the flexi time. So flexi time is nothing but, let's say if somebody has recorded anything hours which are less than the planned working hours, it generally should show as in negative working hours. So how do we do that is, let's say for the week one, um, and normally a usual planned working hours are 40. We're taking the existing example, and let's say in the week one we have worked for, let's say, 43 hours. Okay, so 3 hours is actually your plus 3 hours to the account. But let's say for the week two, we were able to work only up to 35 hours, which is basically you're working 5 hours less than the planned working hours. So basically this has to get well, compensated with the uh, recorded working hours. So how do we do that is through the flexi time. So flexi time is nothing but there's something called as an working time account. Okay, working time account, which is nothing but it's kind of an time account type where usually holds the difference between planned and working hours. Okay, so this is what today we're gonna see how it works in the system. And in order to do that, what we normally do is we create a time valuation and we use a specific time valuation, which system will check on the whether it is a difference or whether it is whether it is being a positive one or a negative one. And how we look into it is, let's say, theoretically we'll look at here. We'll create a fourth valuation, which is basically input would be your recorded working time. So which is from the output of V2, which is recorded working time without breaks. Then we wanted a difference between the planned working time, so this is it should be. So it will be like TV1, which is again the planned working time without breaks. What this will give is, and we'll use a valuation type, something called as an, this will give XX, let's say, whether it is positive or negative, I'm not looking at that. But how do we use the valuation is, we have a specific valuation type called as a difference between planned and recorded working hours. And what we're going to do is, this valuation output that we're getting, right, this output, so what we will do is, let's say if it's an exceeding one, it's in case it's a positive one, okay, in case of positive, which is actually your overtime, indirectly it's nothing but an overtime. Let's say we are getting recorded of hours of 10 hours in a week, okay. So in the week, what it will do is, the first 4 hours, I'm taking first 4 hours, should be redirected to this bucket, to flexi time bucket. And remaining 6 hours, right? Remaining 6 hours should be considered as an overtime, and this can be taken further. Now we're not talking at this point of time, we'll look at this later, but we want to configure this one. So initial 4 hours of your overtime should be calculated and stored in the working time account bucket, so that you can compensate for the less hours every week. So how we going to configure that is, we using through the valuation. Whatever you have received this, right, the, the total overtime is somewhat similar here, but here it will show you whether it is positive or negative. This is will this in this case it will show you only the positive ones, because we are choosing only the positive and the positive number, which is exceeding your planned working time. So here in the time valuation, what we do is, let me duplicate this tab. We see the difference, right, normally. So what kind of difference we wanted to see is, let's say my output is actually the input for the fourth valuation. So I'm giving a recorded working time without breaks. Sorry, this should be reverse sign 1, because it's adding and giving an input. Later on, let's minus off my planned working time. So what we'll do is, we'll say working time difference. Okay. So what the valuation type that we choose here is, this is what we was speaking about, difference between the threshold and input. So threshold is nothing but the planned working time that we give here. So when you, the moment you choose this, it will have an option. So whether you wanted to do through the threshold group, or whether you wanted to give a fixed value. Now that depends upon this field. If you choose fixed value, then you have to give a threshold value, something like 456 something, some numerical number. But let's say if I'm saying threshold time type group, then I have to define the threshold group here. So it depends upon what kind of threshold type are you choosing. So in this case, particular case, since we wanted to differentiate and minus off and compare it with the planned working time, I'll use a planned working time group. So it's recorded working time with and without breaks, and planned working time without breaks is getting deducted automatically. And normally valuation type for this particular valuation type, we use a valuation method called as an valuate up to today. So it should be calculated day on the daily basis, right? So basically, let's say if I'm working for 1 hour today, then extra, then it should show me as an plus 1 hour. But let's say if I'm falling for short of it, it should show me minus of something. So that's how it is. And then we have to capture outside of threshold, right? Anything that is falling outside of threshold. So we define the time type group above. And what we say here is working time difference, and it's a calculated time. Okay. This is not a pay type at all because we are not calculating or paying out, and the valuation category will remain zero because we are not actually adding any premium to it. So if you wanted to show it on the UI, how to see, how to look at the system, you can show it. Otherwise, you can keep it as no also. So let me do this as now. Let's see difference time derived from difference between planned and recorded. Okay, now I'll add this also here, and this is actually your output. So we're able to create this, and let's see, we'll add it here. Now, what for this particular valuation, what is the system doing is it's just giving me the difference. Now we have achieved only this part where whether it is positive or negative, that we will be able to see it. But what about this one? We said that every anything ours if it is falling on the positive side. Negative side, that's okay. Negative side we are not taking care right now. So positive side at least. Now we have two things. We have overtime also. So let's say we have overtime also, which is giving you extra hours, extra from planned working time, right? And working time difference is also giving me, let's say in case of positive, definitely again, it is indirectly the same overtime only. Now, in this case, if let's say overtime is 10 hours, then it should redirect that 4 hours to out of 10 hours, it should redirect to the working time or a flexi account. That we're going to achieve it through another valuation, which is basically you will give a threshold value, something like let's say up to 4 hours it has to go to the threshold hours. Okay, now what will be the difference here is, let's say I'll give the name as flexi time up to 4 hours. And what is the evaluation here? It would be is you have to take the evaluation output from fourth one, because this is also giving you positive. I'm telling if in case it's a positive, then only give me this value. So my this will serve as input. This is now similar to the overtime in case of positive, right? So give a positive one, and then now here valuation type, you can actually choose this as aggregate input and split. Valuation method as valuate up to today, because it has to calculate daily basis, and valuation fixed value. Here if you have seen in the previous cases, I have used threshold group and have given a group time type group to something which is referring to the value that is bringing up after calculation. But here I'm giving a fixed value and I'm saying this is 4. Now since it is 4, now system should split it, right? It has to split. Let's say it is a 10 hours overtime or 10 hours positive hours, then system should split into 4 and 6, because 4 has to go to the flexi time account and 6 has to go to the overtime bucket. Now how do we do that is we capture it. So within 4 hours it always captures in the below group, because it falls under the threshold. Anything above the threshold, it has to go to the above group, right? Now let me add the time type group here. Let's say flexi time up to 4 hours. Okay. Now this is a calculated time. I'll say this as positive, and let's give a 4 into. Just save this. I'll keep it below. Okay, now create another one which will capture above 4 hours. So it says flexi time above 4 hours. This should be a calculated time, and you wanted to show it on the UI. We will show it on the UI. It says above 4. Flex this code. Now here we have split it up accordingly. Let me add this to. Let's see here. So it is 0 here. Okay. So since it's a flexi time up to 4 hours, it shows minus 40 because we have not recorded. So if you look at the difference here, it is 40 and it is 0. And that's the difference why it is showing you minus 40. So the moment you start recording hours, right, it will show you that you're not falling short of 40 hours. So here it's showing you that it's falling 40 hours short. Now let's say, let us apply everything. So if you see this now, the 40 hours the summary has gone away because there's no need for any 40. So it's actually causing it 0 to 0. So there is no valuation that is got created. Now let's say the moment we start adding something, right? Let's say I have recorded 2 hours extra on this time. If you see the summary here, it's showing you total overtime. Similarly, flexi time up to 4 hours. That means we're saying that if you look at the difference now, working time is actually 2 hours extra. So which can be computed to as a total overtime. And above 4 hours, up to 4 hours, we are taking it into into one of the account bucket, right? Now let's say, let us add another 2 hours here. So recorded hours becomes 4 here. Total overtime becomes 4. Recorded working hour becomes 4. And it says 4 hours. It's actually a positive time. And this is available for the next week if let's say you're not working completely 40 hours, you can utilize those 4 hours from this to compensate that negative hours. And we'll go further. Let's say I'll start splitting. Let's say now record extra 4 hours, okay, which is actually computing to 6 hours. Now out of 6 hours, it should not go, that 4 hours should not go to the, okay, sorry, that gives a difference here. One second. Hmm, so looking at evaluation, which is actually, okay, so it is causing it daily. So why it is showing as 2 hours into the flexi time only is because we have chosen a calculation for the overtime. Yeah. So this, it's because of this difference. So So here, the valuation method that I have chosen for the difference working in time, sorry, for the difference in working time is actually for the every day. Like it will check for the 2 hours every day, and above 2 hours or above 4 hours, let's say if it is valuation up to today. So if you have seen the difference here, so every day, even it is 2 hours, it will still go into the same bucket, and it will check for that for the 4 hours in a day, so which is not a correct one. So let's say if the valuation here I have kept it as an up to today or per day, then system would check for the 4 hours on that particular day, which is not an ideal case in any of the scenario, right? So basically we should be looking for the complete week. So in a total week, the overtime, if it is crossing 10, if it is crossing 4 hours, then it should automatically bring to the next bucket called as in 4 for next bucket called as in flexi time above 2 hours. So if you look at this, the total recorded working time is 6 hours, which is this, and also your positive working time difference is 6 hours, out of which 4 hours are being redirected to the flexi time up to 4 hours, and the remaining 2 hours should be considered as an overtime, so which is actually falling into this. Now this has to be stored somewhere, right? So basically what we need to store it is, so when we do a submit, system will have to hold this 4 hours somewhere. Now how do we do that is we create on the time profile. Now we have to go back to the time profile which we have assigned to this particular employee. And if you see, there's a time account type for working time account. So let me show the backend to it. So backend is nothing but administer workbench, we normally call that as. So if you look at the time accounts, so it will only have annual account and no other accounts are created because we have only assigned quota type of leave which is called as an annual leave. Now in order to have this flexi accounts also recorded somewhere, we normally have to create one account and and assign it to the working time account where your normally 4 hours will be redirected to that account. And how do we create that is simply the same thing again. So we say it's a flexi time. Payout eligibility, you can keep it as, so normally for the flexi accounts we do not keep the payout eligible because they are only used to compensate the negative hours which is falling short of planned working hours. So the payout is not eligible here. Unit is always hours since we are recording the timesheet in hours, right? So the balance cannot fall something, you can keep it in case of a requirement. I'm not keeping it. The account creation is actually your permanent account. Now you might be clearly aware of these kind of time account types. Normally if you look at the leave quotas, right, so those normally we create as an recurring ones which is like valid for every year. So let's say if I would have created that as an recurring, it would be valid for this particular year up to December. But however, for the flexi accounts, we normally create for permanent account, which is one time account creation at the start time of an hire, and then it will continue up to the employee leaves the organization or in case of any certainty. Okay, so here we are not having accruals assigned because we are redirecting the extra hours that we have recorded here, so there is no accrual frequency to it. If you wanted to keep this, since it's a global one, I'm keeping it as a global one. Interim time account update is also needed, but we'll look into it later. This is specifically for the cases like, let's say this is a permanent account, right? So the permanent account, that means at the start of year, let's say for 2023 on January, I have recorded up to let's say up to December, I have recorded up to 10 hours which are still remaining. Now that 10 hours shouldn't be carried over according to the policy, right? So normally what we do is we assign a interim rule and we say that we reset the balance to zero again so that it's starting fresh from January 2023. So that is when we use the interim account update. So when we do that and then we remove it completely, so that system is ready for, I mean, the account is ready for the next year of usage. And this is now I'll show you a dummy example of interim rule. Yeah. So if you see this is a standard rule, and we don't keep it assigned always to the until unless it is needed. So if you look at this, generally what it is doing is it is just closing off the account up to now. Every year you have to change the data. So the posting type should be 01/01/2023 if I have to run for this particular year. Now, what it is saying is, if you look at the variables, it is asking you to get the balance of posting types. Now, here the posting type generally, whatever we have is, I'll show you in the system now how it looks at. You will have to give a posting type that is relevant to this particular posting, and you say that anything that is fallen within this months, like to 2022 months, which is 12 months, I should get that balance. Now that complete balance, if you look at this first signature, it says opposite sign. Let's say I had 10 hours in my account for 2022 when I'm running this interim rule on December 31st of December 31st of this year. That positive 10 hours will be taken as negative 10 hours, and it will be posted as 01/01/2022. So basically it's not 2022, but it's actually um, in our case it's 23. And then it will so if you look at this, create a time account type, and it will post you as plus, and it will give you an interim update. So that's way you actually reset the account to complete zero. And every year we change this date, and then we assign it, and then we run it, and we remove it. So that's how it is. So I'm just not assigning it right now. Let me add it here. So when you're done, since you are assigning the time account type here, you will also have to assign it here. But in order to assign it here, we need a time type. So what we do is we create a time type called as an XC time. If you wanted to create a workflow, or let's say this is specifically needed because whenever you wanted to compensate any hours which is falling short of, you will need an approval, right? So basically that approval, if you need, you can add it. Otherwise, I'm not adding it right away. This will again go to employees manager in case, depending upon what kind of workflow you have decided. Now since it's in hours, it's hours, the classification will remain as absence. So we have to select this permitted fractions for hour is I'm taking allow requesting in hours and minutes. So if you have requested this, then no matter what it is, if you have 1 hour also in the flexi account, you will be able to select that 1 hour for your compensation. But let's say if some policies only allow if it's up to 8 hours in a 9 hours in a day, and it is completely full day, you have to wait until you have extra hours in your records. And then the posting priority, assign the one which we have created at the first point, the flexi time as one. There also you can give flexi L2. Now the posting priority is always through the rules because we do not have different time account periods. That's why it is always through the rules depending upon this one. If you have, let's say if you have two accounts, then you would have assigned it, and based on the sequence that you have assigned, right? If it's flexi time is first one, then it will deduct the balance from the first account, and then it will go to the second account when it gets rid of. In our case, we do not have multiple accounts. That's the reason I'm adding only one account. And since it should be available on the front end of an employee, the moment we add it, normally um, it gets available for the posting types. So since we do not have the account created, we have created it manually somewhere here. So what we do is, in order to generate an account, since Harsha has covered in the previous one, we have something called as a time of calendar. Now this time of calendar, you can create a new calendar to generate the account. Okay, so what is that actually? What we create is actually account creation. We call this as an flexi time. This is the one which we have created. Let's say this particular employee, and we'll choose so runtime. We normally choose the following day, which is your future dated. Even though you have created it, you can run it right away. So we have got created one account. Let's refresh and see. So if you see this, so now look at the valuation, what we have created it. Like let's do the validation now. So time account type is flexi time because we have given that name. This is the external code for this particular account. It's actually something called as an account number, layman language. So the time type is actually your permanent time type. Since its validity, if you look at it, it starts and ends on December 31st, some infinity number. That means this employee will have only one valid account for the complete life cycle of his in this particular organization. So all the postings will happen on this account only. Now, let's say this is positive. Okay, this is actually giving me the positive one. Okay, we have 4 hours in a positive account. Okay, so let me go to the employees manager. So when you look at the timesheet of this particular employee, it will show you the system will show you up, like what is your recorded working time, what is the planned working time, what is the recorded working time. So let me approve and see if it has to be added to this week. It's not. It's not showing. Yep. I'm just checking. It's not adding it up. I'm just checking what's the issue here. So basically, that 7 hours has to be added or 2 hours has to be added. I'm checking that. So far, any questions? If you have any questions, I can take that up. Anybody, any questions? Rate per day, time difference in time account. I think there's some issue with the posting types. It has to be added. The 4 hours has to be added here, but I think it's not working as expected. January 1st, employees. Just adding extra hours here to see why it's not working. Just give me a moment. This it's actually I think I need to check and come back because I think there's not working. This is basically your extra hours, the 4 hours that is being added from the previous week and this week. It has to be added to the flexi time account and it should show 4 hours added in this account. That is not showing up. I'll check in tomorrow by tomorrow's session and I'll come back to you on that. But today we'll stop the session here because later on, once we're done with this figuring out, we'll be working on this one. So the flexi hours which are shown as 5 hours, this will be further bifurcated and this will be considered as an extra overtime that we are working, and that has to be further bifurcated to the overtime base or a premium charges. So we'll see it in the tomorrow session. In the meanwhile, I'll check on this issue. I don't know, it has to get added every time, but it's not working as expected today. And to see the back end any jobs, and I'll figure it out and see tomorrow. I'll tell you what was the issue while fixing this issue. In the meanwhile, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. I'll be able to answer your questions. Madhumita. Any questions, Madhumita? I think you're speaking on mute, but I'm not able to hear you. In case of any questions, please let me know, or if you have not been able to ask it in the